That's
But we're
horrifying.
started now.
Nobody
cool.
cares. Nobody cares
Hello.
if we go live right now.
Oh, I think a lot of people care.
Nobody cares. No one's in the chat. Well, these people are in the chat, but
My
Well,
mom
people.
cares. She's watching.
Is she
again.
watching again?
Hi,
Mom, we
Mom.
didn't drive you
Awesome.
away. I'm so happy you came back.
No, in fact, she said, well, I'm so sad that I missed all your other shows. I said, Mom, I can send you the links for the videos of the shows we've done. And so she's been going through them since we started with Picard.
Oh my.
Oh, that's awesome. My mom was doing the same thing. She was watching, she's already watched Picard, so there's no spoilers, but she's been watching our live show and then rewatching the episode of Picard so she can catch all the things that we talk about. And I'm like, oh, that's adorable. I love it.
Oh,
Thanks,
well,
Mom.
my mom's not watching unless in the future she starts to watch this and she feels bad that I was here on the show saying she's not watching.
Aw.
I could text her now, but it would get complicated because then I have to send her the link and I can't deal with it now.
Well, speaking of moms, the episode we're talking about is Family from Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 4, Episode 2. This is the episode that takes place right after the conclusion of Best of Both Worlds. Picard, in a stunning turn of events from what episodic Trek did up to this point, is actually experiencing fallout from the events of the previous episodes and dealing with some of the psychological issues and stuff that came out of his capture and assimilation by the Borg, which I think personally is a great place to start with this episode because this was really a change for Star Trek. And I love that they decided to do this. They saw this singular event that happened in Picard's life and said, well, we can't just move past it and, ignore it. We have to deal with some of the fallout. And I see that my mom is in the chat. Hi, Mom.
Yay!
Hi, Dan's mom.
Wow. Hi, Dan's mom. I have so many questions.
Don't we all?
Take that a number of ways. So yeah, what do you guys think of that, about that, Star Trek taking this turn that they've never really done before, kind of having those events carry through into this episode and dealing with that, trauma that he's gone through?
Go, Bruce, go.
Go, Bruce. Yes.
I think it was long overdue. Honestly, I think if anything, I think it took them out of the mold, of a typical Star Trek story of, starship goes and meets with these aliens or whatever it is in space battles or whatever it may be. We return to Earth. It's about family. It's not about discovering new worlds and all this other stuff. And it's great insight into the characters. And I think that was something that this show really needed right at this point. I think the perfect timing was at this start of this season 4.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think it was also a very good time to do that because honestly, if they had just carried on like none of this had happened, it would have not felt right or good because besides the actual physical injuries that he suffered, the mental ones go far, far deeper. And they haven't in the past in Trek, before counselors became part of Starship's crews, they haven't really dealt with the mental issues as well, because there's still, and even today, there's still so much stupid stigma about it. And you're taking care of your mental health is just as, if not more important than taking care of your physical health. And so it was nice to see some consequences and Picard just saying, oh, I'm fine. And he is not. And we know it. So it made this episode very powerful. And I've been extremely emotional today, like more than usual, which is saying something because I'm always emotional. And this one really hit me hard today. And I think it's partially because of just the subject matter, but also because of the context of what we know is in Picard's future.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, so much crying. There was so much crying for me.
Yeah. Same. I'm glad you said that. I've seen this episode many, many times. Last time I probably saw it maybe a year ago. I mean, it hasn't been that long. But I mean, I've always felt it was a little emotional, but like you, Brandi, for some reason this time it really hit me. And I think some of it has to do with where we know Picard eventually lands, and we'll talk more about that. But also for me, I saw a difference watching it for me at this time of my life because my kids are getting older and one's about to leave the house. And the Worf story was always something kind of sweet and fun for me. But this time it was something different because every time I used to watch it, I would look at it and go, oh, that's like my parents. Oh, that's like my parents. Now I was watching it and I was relating more with the parents and looking at Worf as like my child. So I was looking at it as a totally different situation because there's times where we just visited the campus my daughter's going to. And I felt like, we couldn't really go into anything because of COVID-19, just walk around the campus. But I was like, I can see us going to visit her and being like Worf's parents were, but at her school, not on the Enterprise, but just like embarrassing her. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm now those people. I used to relate to Worf and now I'm relating to them. But also the same, like I'm getting older and I just talked to my brother yesterday. I'm going on too much, but I just talked to my brother the other day. We don't talk all that often, but then even to see Jean-Luc with Robert and there was, relating to that, there was so much I was relating to and I kept finding little tears coming down my cheek, which is rare for me. So this is really hitting me for some weird reason.
Yeah, there's a lot in this episode that plays with those parts of the human psyche and plays on those emotions a bit. And speaking to Picard's story, and just like right off the bat, right at the start of this episode, Patrick Stewart's just an amazing actor because, he's not saying anything different than, Picard would say or anything like that, but there's something about his demeanor, something about how he's carrying himself. There's just in his eyes that little bit of hesitancy, a little bit of not the man standing on the bridge of the starship, for example, is what really got to me. Like, but I'm better, and I'm like, I don't believe you. Like you were saying, Brandi. And there's just so many great moments in this. For me, emotionally, the parts that really hit me were the lines that Renee was giving every time he was talking about his future and the hope for his future. Like right at the end of the episode where he says, someday I'll be boarding my starship. And this is awful. Like, spoiler alert for Star Trek Generations, Robert and Renee die in a fire. Mm-hmm. Like, this episode is so brutal with that in mind, in that respect. And people always talk about how dark Star Trek Picard is and Star Trek Discovery is. That was dark in Generations when they did that to affect Picard's character in that way. And I don't know why, but watching this in the past, I've never really taken that in when I'm watching this episode. Like, I've never had that on my mind, but this time, for whatever reason, that was foremost on my mind. That moment in Generations where Picard gets the message on the view screen and you just see his face, and then when he breaks down later in front of Troy, I'm just like, oh man, the like retcon effect it has on this episode. That's not the right word, but ignore that. It just, it was a kick. Like, it hurt. It was brutal.
Yeah, I was also thinking of that scene from Generations, and the look on his face, it's like someone has physically wounded him, like someone had just stabbed him in the heart, and in just one facial expression. And so you knew whatever had happened was really bad, and then when you find out what it is, and it's just like, oh. Mm-hmm. It was hard. It was really hard. And I was thinking that the whole time I was looking at Renee. I'm like, you don't have a future, little man. And it's not fair.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Especially there at the end where Robert's like, let the boy dream, And I was like, oh, that really hurts. And even that right prior to that, when Jean-Luc is leaving, walking away, I thought this is the last time he sees his family.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I thought the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of Picard walking away and last times and stuff, I noticed this time watching this episode a thought that I hadn't had before, and it's when Picard's leaving his quarters and he grabs some books and then looks in his bag and thinks better of it and puts the books back, and then goes to the door, walks through the doorway, and turns around and gives his quarters this lingering look, and then walks off. And I was like, oh my gosh, some part of him thinks this might be the last time he's on that ship. And I love that it's kind of mixed messages, because he almost takes the books, then he's like, no, I'll be back. And then there's the maybe I won't, And I mean, we know watching the show, he's not going to leave the show at this point or anything like that. But the character in that moment, and through events that happen in the episode, which we'll talk about, there's a chance that he might leave the Enterprise. And I hadn't remembered that look back at the quarters or given it any weight at the time, but it's a neat little touch that, like, oh, interesting. I didn't catch that before.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was something I noticed too, and I thought, I don't remember that. But surely the episode didn't just suddenly change because I'm watching it this time. So I just thought, wow, that's something that just never occurred to me. It's always interesting to me to watch older Trek at different stages in my life, because different things come out of it. I have different viewpoints each time and notice something completely different depending on what's going on in my life or what I've just been through or whatnot. Trek, you multi-layered, beautiful beast, you.
It's not the episode that changes, Brandi.
It's me. I know. I know. That's the whole point. I've got a bit of a drippy nose. My apologies. I've been crying a lot today.
Chopping
Not in a
lots
bad
of
way.
onions.
No. Well, first there was this, and then I went and did a podcast, and then after that we watched Hamilton, and so that's a 3-tissue show, folks. Buckle in for that. If you have Disney Plus, please watch Hamilton. It will change your life.
I did that today. We all were down here in my movie theater room, had it on the big screen, and spent the almost 3 hours. And we ordered Domino's pizza in, which is not my favorite pizza, by the way.
It's nobody's favorite pizza.
It's gotten a lot better. It used to be awful.
It has real cheese now, guys.
It's good.
It has real. Yeah. What were they using for cheese before? Seriously, they were It was a big advertising thing. Now with real cheese, I'm like, wait, what? What were you using before and calling it cheese?
I don't know.
I just want to mention this because, yes, the actor who plays Renee in this episode is the same actor who plays the young Picard when they get de-aged in the episode Rascals in season 6. So, yeah, this is the same kid who has the scene with Riker. He's my number one dad. Yeah, this was that kid.
So and but the image of Renee that we see in Generations is not of this actor. It's a
no. That's totally recast. The him that we see in his photo album and in the Nexus is a different guy, different kid.
Yeah, different kid. So Suzanne, to answer your question, what's my favorite pizza? like what with toppings, or just like where do I like to get my favorite pizza? I will tell you, New York style pizza is my go-to. So but where I live here, where I typically go is called Brooklyn Joe's, and the other place is Five Boroughs. Of course, they're all New York related, so there you go.
Yeah.
But anytime I'm in New York, I get some pizza while I'm there because I need some good pizza. And one time my boss complained to me. She says, I saw your expense report, and when we fly you to New York, we are not flying you there to eat off the streets. And I'm like, I'm not eating off the streets. I went into a pizza place. Come on.
Oh, that's great. David, Cockney French kid. Yes, everybody in this episode are British. They're not French, which, when you hire Patrick Stewart to play a French captain, I guess you can't have his family and friends in his home village all be French, because then it would really stick out. But, it kind of screams a little bit like, oh, they sound foreign. It's fine.
Well, yeah, and that's a trick that they've been playing in movies for decades.
Mhm.
Oh, we need some Germans, they're gonna have British accents. Oh, we need some people from Russia, they're gonna have British accents. You know, it doesn't matter what European country they're from, they were played by British people.
Yeah. Or Sean Connery shows up as a Russian U-boat captain because, that makes sense.
Yeah, that made total sense.
It's
Didn't Khan have
from
a
the
British
Moscow
accent?
Highlands,
Brandy, didn't Khan
Sorry.
have a British accent in Into Darkness?
Oh God.
Yep.
Sorry, I shouldn't have brought that up. It was too easy.
To be fair, because India was a British colony for so
Yes.
long, it is possible that natives from there could have had British accents.
There you go.
No. No. Sure.
Yep. Agreed. Agreed.
That'd
English
work.
accents, yes.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, that definitely stuck out. Especially, with names like Robert and Louis and, but very British accents. Yeah.
Yeah. And they were also 20th century accents.
Well, it was a product of its time. We can't fault it for that. Because, now the 21st century British accent is so different.
Oh my gosh. Much better too.
Totally agree.
So we'll definitely come back to Picard's story, of course, but I do want to talk a bit about the Worf B plot in this, I guess, because I'd say the Crusher story is kind of the C plot. It's pretty short. It's shorter than I remember, actually, but the Worf story takes up a good chunk of this episode. And Bruce, you talked a little bit about the shifting perspectives of that. I thought that was really interesting. I always really liked this story, and I'm going to kind of go back on a bit of what I said earlier, which was, Star Trek doesn't carry stuff through from previous episodes. I do like that we've had the Worf discommendation story going through season 3 and now into season 4, and that this is kind of an extension of that, and how that plot line, Worf getting discommendated by the Klingons, they all went like this and turned their back on him. He lost his honor, supposedly, and all that stuff. Basically taking the fall for Duras's family, as every generation does at some point. And the effect that has on his human parents, I thought was a really interesting thing for the story to tackle. And the fact that this episode was written by Ronald D. Moore is not lost on me. Someone so responsible for the development of the Klingons and Worf's character, and the fact that he would bring that into this story, I thought was really cool. So yeah, I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts on that part of the story?
I love it. I love it. And I know the feeling of being the child whose parents are embarrassing. Every kid goes through a moment like that in their lives where they're just like, oh, mom and dad, please stop. But, I'm well past that age. So I used to be able to identify with that. I'm not a parent, so I can't identify with the Rozhenkos on that level, but I can certainly identify with their concern for their son. And I love the conversation that they have with Guinan. It actually made me cry this time. That conversation has never made me cry before. It was just like, my heart. So I love that it starts out with Worf being the, ugh. And as the visit progresses, he finally, says, when you got here, I wasn't sure I wanted you here. When you said you wanted to come on board, I wasn't sure I wanted you here, but I am glad that you're here.
Mm-hmm.
And just the joy on their faces that he said that to him. I'm like, oh, that little Klingon's growing up. Our boy to be a real man. So it's just, it's sweet, it's poignant, and I love Papa Rozhenko just trying to talk to everybody alone. Just like of course he wanted to see all the stuff because he has all the specs and diagrams at home, but it wasn't just about that. Like, he wanted to talk to Worf's crewmates and get an idea of how they viewed him and make sure that he was being treated well and that he had friends, all these wonderful things that parents do. And yeah, and mom was just like, stop embarrassing your son, please. So it's honestly, every moment of that story I just really enjoyed, and it made me cry in places that didn't expect.
I also like how the parents weren't so naive. Like, we're
Yes,
not
yes.
doing anything wrong. Well, I'm glad it wasn't played that way, especially, his mother knows how her husband can be and she recognizes it. So they weren't dumb, they
Mm-mm.
they knew, but they also are proud parents. They can't help themselves also in a sense, but they know. But I also like really watching Michael Dorn. I was really watching his
Yes.
face in this.
Mm.
There's a lot of he didn't really come across really annoyed to me or upset that his parents like he always had like a slight grin every time he was with them. Almost like I'm pleased to have you here. It's a little uncomfortable, but I'm glad to see you. It just felt that way to me.
It's the most human we've seen Worf, at least in TNG, which makes sense. He was raised for the most part by human parents. And I love the scene when his parents first come on board, because he's grousing and grumping with O'Brien, and it's always something with parents, and he's like, "Roar." And then as soon as they appear on the transporter pad, like and the way he plays it is like he can't help himself. His face just lights up. He's like, "Mother, father." He's just like, so great. I love it. He's just so giddy. And yeah, every time he's with them, he's, like you said, there's just a little smile on his face. He's so happy to see them, all the way through right to the end when he's like, well, maybe you could send me a little of your roe cake blood pie. And he's just like, I could see little kid Worf, at Helena Roshenko's apron as a little kid or something like that. Pastoral scene or whatever. But yeah, it's played really well. It's really fun to watch. And that scene where he comes clean with them and says, like, I initially wasn't sure I wanted you here, but I'm really happy you're here, basically. It's such a great scene. And it's how Worf would do it. He's going to be upfront and honest, but honest that he's come around as well. And I love that. There's one little bit of acting that I loved, and it's really subtle. I hadn't noticed it before, but like when they're in 10 forward and Riker calls Worf and he's like, Riker to Lieutenant Worf. And Worf's like, Worf here. Right when he taps his badge and says Worf here, his mother like turns to his father and is like, like, did you hear that?
That is so much
cute.
That would be so much like my mom, except she would turn to me and say, he should be reporting to you, not to him. But yeah, go on. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, speaking of the transporter room scene, there was one thing that bothered me about this, and that was Worf grousing about how his mother was always late, and O'Brien's like, yeah, women, huh? And I'm like, excuse me?
Yeah.
Excuse me very much. Oh, and then I remember who he marries in the future, and I'm like, well, no wonder. Sorry, not a Keiko fan. Never been shy about saying it either.
Yeah, and Keiko was never late to anything. I don't know.
Yeah, but it's just kind of I just thought, oh, really, guys?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Come on.
That's that to me too. But speaking of the transporter room, the later scene, which Paul mentions in the chat, I like it when Picard beams back and runs into Worf's parents.
Yes.
And the thing I like about it is just that exchange, but when the doors close, Picard's just standing there and then he gets a grin, like, yes, family. He's just spent time with his, and yep, there's Worf.
I do love that. And it's like the realization of all of Worf's father's dreams. He's like, oh, the captain! Wonderful ship you have here, sir. It's just like, oh my goodness. Well, there were a few places that I didn't get to see what with the repairs and all. It's like,
and then pushing him into the transporter room. I've got all the specs and diagrams at home.
Oh, it's adorable. Yeah. No, I loved that for sure. Let's touch on Wesley's story a little bit, if there's nothing else that we want to talk about with regards to Worf and his storyline.
I'm good.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Yeah, so Wesley has kind of a small C plot in this, and I'd say Beverly also has a part in that plot as well. There's some old family heirlooms, Jack Crusher's stuff, basically, that she'd kept in storage that she had delivered to the Enterprise. And in this, along with his uniform and some mementos, including a book, How to Advance Your Career Through Marriage, which was apparently how Jack proposed to her, which I thought was a nice little detail.
Mm-hmm.
There's a holographic recording of Jack Crusher made to Wesley shortly after he was born, and he apparently had plans to make many more of these, but of course he died when Wesley was very young. And Beverly gives this to Wesley, and he watches it on the holodeck. And it's a short scene, but I think it says a lot in it. I think it's a poignant scene. I'm one of those people that actually have always liked Wesley Crusher. I think he's a good character. I love Will Wheaton, and it's an understated scene, and really, I think, well played by everybody involved here. Will Wheaton, especially, I think, really shines in this. So, Brandi, what are your thoughts with this bit of a C
Well,
plot?
I actually really enjoy it, and the message, yeah, that part makes me cry normally, so especially today, it made me cry. Just, him saying all these things about how I'm gonna, probably make mistakes, and I can't wait to see you grow up, and you're like, "But you never get to do it, and it hurts." So, but I think it was played just right, and it was interesting because Beverly said, "I'm not sure if it's going to do more harm than good." And that was why she was kind of reticent to giving it to him. But she does do it. And Wesley's gotten to the point now where he is not always completely torn up about not having his dad around.
Mm-hmm.
So he gets something different from that message and gets some closure, I think, as well. Just words from his own father, just for him. Just for him. His mom didn't know what was in the message. No one else knew what was in the message. It was just for him. And I think Will Wheaton played it just right. And it was just a beautiful, heartfelt, and hurtful scene.
Mm-hmm.
This goes back. I mean, I agree with everything that Brandi just said. And just to add to that, it goes back to what we were saying earlier about the timing of this episode. I think this kind of scene works best at this point in Wesley's life, as opposed to him. It would have worked fine if it was season 1, season 2, whatever. But I think it really works well now, where Wesley is now older. He is a Starfleet officer in uniform, and he's about the almost, getting up there to being close to the age of his father in that holodeck thing. So it's like Wesley's now a man, and now this is a conversation. Well, not really conversing, but it's man to man now. And I think this is a point in Wesley's life he could really understand what his father is saying versus when he was younger. And Jack Crusher planned it to be something that Wesley wouldn't see until he was 18. So I really liked it at this point in Wesley's life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think all three of the plots of this episode really kind of have that aspect to them where it's, reconciliation of a sort or coming to terms with relationships. In the case of Wesley, it's a relationship that he never really had with his father on, a conscious level, I guess, because he was so young when his father passed away. So, coming to terms with that, and I think it's almost like the coming to terms part of the story could also be seen as between Wesley and Beverly Crusher, because it took some effort for Beverly to decide, like, yeah, I'm going to show this to Wesley, and I think he's old enough to deal with it. And, she started out not sure if he was, still thinking that maybe he needed to be protected from this or something like that. So I love that evolution here that, obviously she came to terms with that and gave it to Wesley, and then we get to see the result of that. So I don't know. It's like, even though Beverly's not in the scene, it feels like an advancement of their relationship as mother-son as well, which is kind of nice.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess getting back to the Picard story, the kind of A-plot meat of this story, the big kind of conflict, of course, with regards to Picard is with his brother, and that becomes very apparent very early on when we see how he's greeted by his brother, which is basically, we serve dinner at 8 and
Make
go make yourself at home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This is interesting. I love the way Robert is played by the actor here. I think like if TNG were remade today, that would be like Charles Dance. Like I got that kind of vibe from him.
Right.
And I was like, ooh, that could be really interesting. But Jeremy Kemp is the actor who plays Robert Picard here, and I think does an excellent job. I buy this guy as Picard's older brother, both like looks and demeanor and the relationship between them, Picard being like the star athlete and pupil, and him being Jean-Luc's brother, like Jean-Luc's older brother. That's what he was the whole time. And I can see, like, I'm an only child, so like some parts of this I just don't really relate to because I never had that kind of relationship with someone. But I think the episode does a really good job of making it feel real, and I feel like I know these people. Like I've met these brothers before, if that makes sense.
I thought we were brothers. This is my Robert.
Well, I'm not going to get into a mud fight with you in a vineyard, but
oh man, I would pay money to see that.
I don't think we have that kind of angst there, which is good.
No, we
That's
don't.
fair.
But yeah, I have a brother, and I said earlier, I mean, my brother and I have a better relationship than that, but definitely, growing up, it wasn't always, perfect. There was a lot of fighting and I don't want to say bullying, but picking on each other and not always getting along and that sort of thing. But I mean, I don't have that relationship with my brother like we Jean-Luc and Robert have in this one. The thing I just want to mention real quick now, I'm thinking about it. I made a note about this when Jean-Luc is talking to Louis about about his brother. Louis says, well, you've always reached for the future and your brother for the past. And Picard says, there should be room for both in his life. And I remember thinking, but I feel at this point, Picard has put his past aside and he's criticizing his brother for always looking in the past. But Picard's always looking to the future and not embracing his past until we get later in this episode. So I think the two are very much yin and yang in that respect, past and future, and they both need to accept that. And once they do, they're drinking wine and throwing mud at each other.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily in that order.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. The lovely actor playing Robert could say more with a facial expression than he could with any words, and it was an amazing thing to watch. As being the age that I am now and the experiences that I've had in my life, etc., I can appreciate that even more as a performance, how masterful he was at communicating without words. Because the things that he was saying, there was nothing aggressive or upsetting about them. It was the expression on his face when he was saying them that just like, wow, you don't mean any of those things. Not one. And it's interesting how his expressions would soften whenever he was speaking with Marie, his wife.
Mm-hmm.
It would be just like transformed. Oh, he was so good, you guys. He was just so good. And the perfect person to play Picard's brother. But I agree with you, Bruce, that they both want the other person to come to their side instead of meeting in the middle. And that was their problem. I have two siblings. I have an older sister and I have a younger sister. And my issue growing up was actually, well, where do I fit in? Because that one's the oldest, this one's the baby, and I'm just here. And so I never felt like I had my own identity. It was, I was always associated with either my older sister or younger sister. It was never, oh, look, look at that. There's Brooke. That's Brandy's sister. No, it was always like, oh, hey, it's Brooke's sister. Oh, hey, it's Becky's sister. So, and that's not something that I blame anyone for. It was just difficult for me to figure out what was special about me, because I don't know. It was just
to carve out that identity. Yeah.
Yeah. It was like I was always in one of their shadows. I don't know. It was weird.
So what's it like now when you're with your sisters?
Let's see. How do I put this? I enjoy my younger sister's company very much. I enjoy my older sister's company on a surface level. And that is all I'm going to say about that.
So you kind of have a family episode in your life too.
Oh guys, the stories that I could tell, but I do not air my laundry on live shows. So
no, yeah.
No, for sure.
But yeah, there have been things. I mean, there's always disagreements between siblings, but my older sister did like to terrorize me on a regular basis. So that I think she made me permanently jumpy, quite frankly, which is why I'm startled very, very easily.
Do you think Jean-Luc, I keep saying Jean-Luc because they're both Picards, but do you think Jean-Luc has more of a wall up because he was
absolutely
and bullied on because of Robert?
Yeah,
I absolutely believe that he does, and especially right now, he is in a weakened mental state, and he does not want to show it at all. And Robert picks up on that and forces him into this confrontation so that he can get it all out, which is not to say, oh, he has one little breakdown and everything's all fine and good. No, that's just the beginning of the healing process in that regard. So, but his brother knew enough to provoke him into that fight, which was, it ended up being a catharsis that they both needed. So points to Robert for knowing the best way to handle that, even though it seemed really terrible at the time.
It did, but now I'm starting to think about jumping ahead to Star Trek Picard and the events that happens in his life that leads him to what happens in that series. How his life would have played out differently had Robert not died in a fire. Would Jean-Luc return to the Vineyard? Or maybe not, because his brother would have been there. Or when Jean-Luc left Starfleet, would he have gone to his brother and his brother talk him in somehow going back or whatever? I just wonder how Jean-Luc's life would play out differently if his brother was still around.
I honestly think that he would have gone back to the Vineyard, even so, because he does say, if he should ever doubt again if he belonged in Starfleet, that's where he would go.
That's
he knew where to
come.
come.
Right down. Yep.
And so, yeah, I think he absolutely would have gone back there, regardless of whether his brother and Renee were still alive.
The interesting question kind of then becomes, like, if he did go back and his brother were still there, would Robert push him to do something else rather than stay on the Vineyard after that? It's kind of an interesting question too, like he does in this episode.
Well, and that's the thing. I think he would have. We wouldn't have gotten the Picard series, because I think he would have provoked Picard, and it's like, oh, so you're just giving up like a little baby, huh? So yeah,
exactly.
He didn't have that influence to do that for him.
Yeah,
but then we wouldn't have had the Picard series the way it was, and I'm not. I'm all about loving what we did get with all of Picard's flaws thank you for having flaws.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's so real.
So human, yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
if Robert had lived, then the series wouldn't be what it is. It would be Star Trek: The Picards.
um, you bring up a really good point about Picard having flaws, and this is kind of an episode that I point to a lot when people say like, oh, that's not the Picard that, in Star Trek Picard, he's not the Picard we saw in TNG and all this stuff. And I see like lots of connective tissue back to this episode, not just the vineyard, not just like that aspect, but who Picard is and where he's at in his life. Like at this point, it was kind of a coin flip at times. He was going to run from Starfleet and, work on this Atlantis project and just leave everything behind because of what happened to him with the Borg. And, there's that scene where, when Marie says like, oh, this is because of all that stuff that just happened to you. And he immediately dismisses, this is not because of that. Then he stops at that, or is it? Like I like that he's introspective enough to kind of realize that. And yeah, this is, there was almost a breaking point here where he stepped away from Starfleet, and he didn't because of, the events of this and figuring himself out. And he didn't have that in Picard right away. That's what the series Picard is about, is his coming to terms and realizing, no, there's still good I can do out there. So, that's just this story, told a different way at a different point in his life. So I don't know. I see a lot of connections there.
Yeah, this is the first time I've watched that episode since Star Trek Picard came out.
Same.
Yeah, me too.
And yeah, it really, there's a lot of things that echo. I mean, it's obvious to me that the creators and the writers of Star Trek Picard were familiar with this episode, of course, and really worked from that, because it's like you said, Dan, it's like I've heard so many times people say like, oh, I don't buy it that Picard would leave Starfleet. He wouldn't leave Starfleet, especially since Kirk told him he shouldn't. I'm like, okay, does everybody listen to everything advice people give you anyway? But
and guys, don't listen to Kirk. Don't ever listen to Kirk. Okay, just no.
But yeah, Picard has had those breaking points. He hasn't always been so devoted to Starfleet that he would never leave. There's times he has considered it. I mean, we've even seen some, and I know the novels aren't the real thing, whatever, but there's times he considered that later in life as he was becoming more of a family man. Should he even stay in Starfleet? I mean, people question things all the time. I question all the time if I should be in my job, and yet I'm still in it. That's for you, Janice, if you're watching.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that we've seen before, and like you say in the novels, absolutely, that's something that's come up a lot for sure. But yeah, through the course of this episode and that interaction with Robert, and as people have pointed out in the comments, that breakdown of Picard, after wrestling with Robert in the mud, it's incredible. Like I'm gonna relay some shocking news here, folks. Patrick Stewart is an amazing actor.
Yes.
Who'd have thought?
Yes. I saw that scene you're talking about right now. I thought, why did he get an Emmy?
Oh man,
because they didn't do that for science fiction shows
and syndicated shows too.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thought that I had right at the end of the episode, where he's saying goodbye, and there's been a reconciliation, and Robert and Jean-Luc actually hug. And I was thinking of this Doctor Who episode where the 12th Doctor says, I don't trust hugs. It's just a way to hide your face from the person you're hugging. And like, that's that scene, because he's like this, he's like about to cry, and then they pull apart and he's like, and it's so well played. Like, it's almost cartoonishly played, like it's almost over the top, but it's just so like he's like pulling on this face muscle here to keep himself from crying. I love it. It's perfect. I thought it was a really great scene, and it's just terrific acting by everyone involved.
Yeah, I lost it on that scene too.
Same.
Yeah.
I'm like, I thought I was done. I need another tissue. There was another thing that I really appreciated when they're having this fight and Picard's having his breakdown, and Robert says, "It's something you're going to have to learn to live with."
Mhm.
Where do you want to do that? Here or on a starship? But it's the part about you have to live with it. You don't get over something like that. You learn to
Yep.
accept it and go on with your life, but it is always going to be with you. It has forever altered you, and you have to figure out a way to live with that. And the same is true of any traumatic experience, losing a loved one. It's the same thing. And there is no set time of grieving or of dealing with something like that, because you just deal with it forever. Yes, you learn to live your life a different way after that situation has happened. But, thinking that, oh, he's just going to get over it. No, that's not the way it works. And the fact that they put that in there, I'm just like, oh, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you for
Mhm.
making this something that isn't going to just go away. And we see the effects of that into the future, especially in First Contact. So, yeah, I just really appreciated that. It was very forward thinking for a show of that time.
Exactly. Well, as you were saying that, Brandi, I was thinking that exact same thing, because that's sometimes the criticism of shows at that time is that, everything's reset. Everybody doesn't, there's no consequences in the next episode. It's just start all over. It's like whatever happened the previous episode just seems to be forgotten about, and no one. And I mean, after going through the best of both worlds, just imagine if the next episode was just another day in the life of the Enterprise and they never refer back to that. But we actually get this episode to deal with the after effects. And that we didn't see that kind of stuff before in Star Trek.
No, absolutely. To your point as well, Brandi, about, that's not something you get over. Throughout that whole scene, my mind was flashing forward to Star Trek Picard, and people criticizing, saying like, Picard's dealt with this. He wouldn't come so unglued with the Borg. He's past all this. This episode is screaming at you. You don't get over this. Like, this is something you have to live with. That is literally said in dialogue. And we see in First Contact, that was a criticism people have had of First Contact too. I thought he was over all of this. No, this is not something he will ever be over. It's such a profound violation of who he is. He led a Borg ship against his fellow Starfleet officers and killed thousands, tens of thousands of people. And you can't get over that. Like, it's amazing he's still in Starfleet, really. Like, it's not something you just get over. And I loved how Picard dealt with it, because not only is it something you never get over and all that stuff, he's also not been in Starfleet for many years and has, lost a bit of that like military bearing that he had, and that training to see past this. He's been a civilian for a long time, and wow, suddenly he's thrust back into the middle of this when his biggest concern was like, oh, the grapes aren't turning out that well this season. Like, it's, I just, this episode really echoed to me and drove home that point that like, this is something that's going to be with him forever.
Well, and anybody who says, oh, I thought he would have been over it by now, what happened on the Borg, then do they have a problem with this episode in the fact that he's not over what his relationship has been with his brother? Are they not complaining about, oh, wasn't his brother over what they dealt with as children? I mean, his jealousy, he should have been dealt with that years ago. It's still there, I mean, as much as you can suppress it, I mean, it's just like Vulcans, Vulcans do have emotions. It's suppressed. We deal with things in our lives. We try to get through it, and we suppress it over time because it's past, but it's still there. And all of a sudden something just triggers it and it comes right back, and it just feels like it was yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. That's called post-traumatic stress. And it can happen decades after the event. Decades. Yeah. And so I never understood that criticism either in Generations or First Contact or Picard, I just thought, have you never been through something so horrible that it consumes your every waking moment until you somehow find a way to get out of bed again and start to go about your life and learn how to adjust and live with this thing? Have you never been through something like that? Well, if not, then you are super lucky. Count your dang blessings and shut your mouth.
Absolutely.
Hear, hear. I thought when
yeah.
she said "shut your mouth," she was talking to me. I'm sorry.
No.
I'm kidding.
Of course not.
So on that note, and is there anything that we haven't talked about that anybody would like to bring up either here or in the comments with regards to this episode?
No, I don't think so. I will say, okay, I'll say real quick. It just hit me. At the time I loved it, and now I don't love it as much, but the uniforms like Jack Crusher was wearing, which is like the movie style uniforms, but just a little different without the collar and the belt and stuff. Back then I thought, oh, it's so cool. It's that movie era uniform. But since we've seen so many different Star Treks, uniforms change like every 5 to 10 years. I'm like, okay, by this point, that uniform is like 40, 60, 80 years old, whatever it is. It's like, come on. Have they never updated them?
Yeah.
But that's just a little nothing thing. I just thought about it when I saw Jack Crusher. That's all.
I do love that it has the TNG com badge. Like there's kind of a transitional thing. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Brandi,
any final thoughts? Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say there wasn't a lot of movement in fashion apparently for that century. So I don't think I have anything further to add over what I've already said. So yeah, it's just really, it hit me really hard this time, not in a bad way, of course. It's just, I don't know, just it's probably been about 4 or 5 years since I've seen it. And I don't know why it was so different this time, but it was. So, and I just appreciated things about it that I never really considered before. So,
yeah, I don't know what it is, but and maybe this is an age thing, but I find myself getting more emotional when I see stuff than I used to.
I'm always, I've always been emotional. So it's only going to get worse from here, guys. I'm just going to carry around tissue wherever I go. Oh, wait, I already do. Already do.
I've been noticing that as I get older too. And also I've noticed with the stress of the last year has made me like emotional at things on television that I'm like, what is this? Like there used to be 2 episodes of Star Trek that made me tear up. And now it's like I'm rewatching old ones and like moments like this I'm getting teary at, and other stuff I'm like, oh my goodness, this is really affecting me. For the record, it was 2 episodes, both in season 4 of Deep Space Nine, The Visitor and Hard Time. Those 2 episodes just kill me, and I tear up every time. So it's a little bit more about me you've learned. One other thing that I just remembered about this episode, just kind of notable, is it is the only episode of Star Trek The Next Generation in which Data does not appear. And he's not in the episode at all. And the other thing is, I don't know if it's the only episode. I think it might be, but it is, if not the only, one of the very few episodes where there is not a single scene on the bridge. Not one scene on the bridge.
Wow, I hadn't even thought of that.
No, we get the observation lounge, so we're just off the bridge, but no bridge scenes.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it.
Yeah.
Because it didn't feel like there was anything missing from this episode.
No, definitely, which is funny that Data's not in it, because he's such a favorite of so many people that like, oh wait, yeah, Data wasn't in this one at all. You know, he's makes up for it in the next episode after this. He plays 3 characters. So they put him to work big time next week. But yeah. So yeah, I guess final ratings, I'm just giving it a 5 for how it affected me this time around. I loved it. So 5 board of directors members that Picard managed to get out of the meeting with.
Oh man. Yeah. I give it 5 out of 5 ripe grapes on a vine.
Nice.
And this will come as no surprise. I give it 5 out of 5 highwaymen assaulting Picard on the road.
Nice. Have been reported in this area for centuries. It's crazy. I love the running joke that he calls him uncle for the rest of the episode.
Yeah.
You're my nephew Jean-Luc, or you must be my uncle Rene.
No, wait, that's the wrong way around.
So yes, lots of good ratings here.
5 out of 5 glasses of Chateau Picard. Is it the 47?
I thought it was 46.
That replicated swill has damaged your taste buds. That synthahol you drink. Terrible children with terrible accents. Wow. 9 out of 10 glasses of prune juice. Excellent. 4 out of 5 holotapes from Jack. 5 out of 5. Excellent. Specs and diagrams. Good. Oh, and Stephen Fothery, 4.7 out of 5, bringing the extra little bit of Trek goodness there. Very nice.
Yes.
So this is where I feel like, based on some of the discussion that's been happening in the chat and that I've seen on Twitter, this is the part where I might be disappointing a bunch of people. We're going to take July off and we're not going to pick an episode for next week. Unfortunately, the next few weeks, we're not going to have a live show. I have a really good reason. Originally, my wedding day was supposed to be July 25th, and we weren't sure if we were going to do it because of the whole COVID-19 and all that stuff. We're going to go ahead, and I'm getting married on July 25th, which means all of our wedding plans have to be ramped right back up. It's going to be small. It's just going to be the 2 families and siblings and stuff like that, and my best man on my side because I have no siblings. Yeah, so sorry, but July is going to be really busy. So we're going to put this on hold. And then after July, we have Lower Decks coming. Starting on August the 6th, I believe it is.
Yes, that is the 6th.
So I'm not sure what exactly it's going to look like or plans or whatever, but I would really like to do some kind of live thing. I don't know if it'll be Friday nights or not. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. But I would like to resume the live show of new Star Trek. So whatever that looks like, whoever's with me doing that. Brandi has already said she is one of them, so that's awesome. We'll get it figured out, but in the meantime, it's going to be a little break from the live stuff for a little while, just because it's going to be crazy busy. So thank you to everyone with the congratulations in the comments, by the way. I really appreciate that. I'm really excited. So it's not the wedding we were planning, but it's going to be great. So,
well, there are people saying what Bruce said before we started the show, live stream the wedding.
Yes.
Let us all be there with you.
Do that.
Oh,
but yeah,
doggone it.
Sorry.
It would have been so fun to live stream it.
That would be cool. I don't know. I'd be worried. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I can say it's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
I don't know. Let's ask Dan's mom if she's still watching. Should the wedding be live streamed here on this channel or just keep it private? So
I don't know if she'll comment. I think I know what her answer would be, but anyway, we'll just leave it at that.
I guess we're not voting on an episode.
I guess not.
So can I bring up a quick little minor topic to end the show with?
Absolutely.
Of course.
Please do.
So what does everyone think of the USS Cerritos ship that we saw this week for the first time? The California class ship. I don't know. We can probably, I've got an image. I mean, I can do a screen share real quick here. If we want to put this on here. I've got it up on an article right now. on Deadline.
Okay, yeah. So if people haven't seen the ship yet, this is the new hero ship, I guess, for Lower Decks, and we've got the little arrow pointing to exactly where those lower decks are on the ship.
Yeah, right there, right there.
Uh,
I'm trying to get it a little better here. Oh, I don't know what I'm doing. But yeah, there it is.
Awesome. I like it. I think it's, for the stated premise of the series, like it's really fitting for the series. I think like it looks like one of Starfleet's less important vessels. It's not a big grand ship like the Enterprise, and it's unique. I think it looks really cool. I like that it's not just another variation of like saucer, secondary hull, engines coming up. It's different.
Yeah.
I really like it.
Well, I want a stool of it because it sits up, But I'd like to see it from different angles before I really make my final judgment. But there's one thing I got to point out, something that Aaron Harvey said the other day on his Facebook page, who is Geek Filter here in the chat, and that is, wouldn't it be cool if the saucer section is from the Enterprise D that crashed in Generations?
Yeah.
I would
That
love
would
it.
be cool. I did see on Twitter that Mike McMahon has responded to that and said, "Oh, that's funny. That's a good idea, but it's not." So it's too bad.
Well,
been
we
great.
didn't really think it was going to be, did we? No,
I don't know.
not
It's
really.
I don't know how fun this cartoon's going to try to be. you know,
I do love that it's like very distinctively of that era. Like it
Mhm.
looks TNG, like post TNG. It's got Galaxy class design elements and the deflector dish. Like, yeah, I really like it. I think it really feels like that era to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do they like? Well, yeah. I don't know. I'm still looking. Where's the engineering section? That's what I'm wondering.
I'm assuming in the saucer section
I
somewhere.
guess. Yeah.
Oh.
Everything's in the saucer.
Yeah. We've seen that before on
Yeah.
starships. So yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, I want to see different angles of this. So
Yeah, I want to see it from behind. I want to see what the lower decks officers are seeing when they look out their window there.
Agree. Here's my opinion. People like to hate new starship designs. People just like to hate in general at anything new that comes out for any of their fandoms. And this new ship designs don't bother me. I love all ships, even if they're clunky and awkward, because, and I've said this to Aaron Harvey in private, because they remind me of me. So I have no problem with this ship design. I think it's interesting and different, and I'm not going to bash it, because why would I do that? What point is there to that? They're not going to change the design of the ship simply because somebody doesn't like it. This is what we have. So learn to embrace it and love it. Love it.
Yeah, I like it.
Same.
Yeah. It's not my favorite, but again, I can't. I need to see more of it. That's the thing. I need to see different angles. I can tell you, the first time I saw the Enterprise D, I was like, I don't know what I think about that anymore. At that time I didn't, but I grew to like it, seeing it different angles and things, but first time image, sometimes it doesn't always work,
Mm-hmm.
So the D is still not my favorite though.
Yeah, I guess it's not my favorite either.
I don't have favorites when it comes to starships. There are just too many of them.
Yes.
All right. Well, I guess thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you in a few weeks when Star Trek Lower Decks premieres. I will have other videos coming out at various points as well, and of course, Positively Trek, our Star Trek general Star Trek podcast. I almost said books and comics. We're adding that we're gonna have books and comics on Positively Trek
Yeah.
as kind of like a little sub show that's still going to be in like the main feed of the show. We'll be announcing all that. It's going to be a lot of fun. And plus we're also going to have something, a sub show that's going to like review the episodes of new Star Trek as it comes out as well. We're still kind of working through that, but we've got some ideas. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Find us on Twitter at Positively Trek, and positivelytrek.libsyn.com to check out the podcast. I'm at Kurtratz on Twitter. Brandi?
Oh Lord. I'm Brandywine12 on Twitter. Brandi with an I, 12 is the number. It was just recently announced I'm on some new podcasts over at the We Made Treks Network. So come and join us for a couple of things I'm doing. First of all, Boldly Go, a Strange New Worlds podcast I am doing with Suzanne Williamson, and I couldn't be happier about it. Yes, we are starting now. We are going to start with The Cage and work our way through all of the rest of the Pike appearances, leading up to the premiere of Strange New Worlds, which still have no idea what that's going to be. So it may be only a once a month or bi-weekly or bi-monthly thing. But in any case, yeah, boldly go. And I almost said something else, but that'd be profanity. Anyway, trying to keep it clean, keeping it clean. But we're really excited about that. And I've never had the chance really to cover Pike, especially The Cage, on a podcast. So really, really ready to dig in. And then my other one is The Vedic Assembly, which, if you couldn't tell by the title, is a Deep Space Nine podcast, which I'm doing with Liam and Nick. And yes, I am Vedic Jackola. And their intro episodes actually out right now. You can find them on iTunes, and other podcatchers are coming. Sometimes it takes about 3 to 5 days for it to get from iTunes to other podcatchers, but you can definitely find it on Spreaker as well. And so I'm doing those things. And then the Headcanon and the Dark Corner podcast stuff I do by myself and with my husband. You can find those at darkcornerpodcast.com. And I think that is all for the moment.
Wow. Yeah.
As far as what I can announce.
I'll tell you what else Brandi has coming out that she hasn't announced yet, and that is no, I can't do that. I don't know. Hey, I'm on Twitter at Admiral_Rex. It's Admiral within the underline Rex, and then Star Wars Report. I'll be doing. I was just on this week's episode, and then I'll be filling in as the main host at the end of this month, 1 or 2 times. And someone who is a recent guest on Positively Trek, Katie Nicolau, who does the Starfleet weather and Star Wars weather, she will be joining me on one of those podcasts too. So she's co-hosting with me. So that'll be fun. And we have a special guest coming up on the next Positively Trek from CBC Radio.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's all we're going to say. That's the hint.
Yeah, that's the hint. Okay. NCIS fan also asks, any idea when Discovery's new season will come out? After
This
Lower
year?
Decks.
Yeah.
It will be this year. We've got, can I say this? I think I can say this. Insider sources tell us it will be coming this year. And you can trust our insider sources way more than Midnight's Edges or that other people whose names I can't say, because that would up the rating of this video. Because
don't even say their names. Don't dignify it
exactly
by saying their proper names.
No. So new Discovery this year after Lower Decks is what we've been told. So no set date yet that we've been told, but it is coming in 2020. So at least 3 good things about 2020 are happening. And yeah, I swear, I just remembered I'm getting married. So I threw that in there too. Anyway.
Is that the one that's called Strange New Worlds?
It's going to be a Strange New World for me, I think.
Exactly.
It's going to be a fun Strange New World.
Yes.
But that one is not coming this year. If
No.
you know what I'm... Anyway. Yeah.
Right. And there are new books coming too, and comics.
Yes, always new books, always new comics. Absolutely. The next novel to come out, Star Trek Discovery Die Standing by John Jackson Miller. I've recently started reading it, and I'm loving it. It is so good. So I can't wait till that officially comes out, and you guys can all read it too. It is excellent. So
I'm starting that after we get off the show here, so I'm excited about that. And yeah, my favorite new podcast name right now is The Janeway with Suzanne
yes,
and Liam.
that is the best title. I saw that pop up on Twitter, and I was like, oh, mwah, I love it. Anyway, have a great weekend. Have a great night, everybody. And we'll see you again sometime in the future. So live long and prosper.